There is a very popular theory among fans that says that Ditto is in fact a failed clone of Mew. And as crazy as it may seem, it makes a lot of sense when you put the pieces together. First, Ditto and Mew have identical transformation abilities. They can both transform into any other Pokémon, something extremely rare in the franchise's universe. And that's not all. Ditto and Mew have the same shiny color, light blue. This visual similarity is no coincidence for many people. They also both have gelatinous and amorphous bodies, with an undefined composition, as if they were forms of raw DNA, with no stable structure. This reinforces the idea that Ditto would be the mold that came before a perfect form, in this case, Mew. Now comes the darkest part of the theory, the creation of Mewtwo. In the games and the anime, the official story is that scientists tried to clone Mew to create the most powerful Pokémon in the world, and they succeeded. Mewtwo is the successful result. But what about the tests that went wrong? The theory says that Ditto was born from these failed attempts to clone Mew. The result was an unstable creature that can only copy the form of others, but has no form of its own, no strength, and no defined identity. It is a reflection, a genetic echo. Another curious fact, Ditto appears most frequently in Cinnabar Mansion, the place where scientists were conducting cloning experiments. It is the same building where there are records of Mewtwo's creation. Coincidence? Not very likely. And there is more. Ditto is a sterile Pokémon. It can reproduce with practically any Pokémon, but it has no sex, no evolution, no previous or subsequent form. It is as if it were an experiment frozen in time, with no past or future, a laboratory error that came to life. In the end, this theory is not officially confirmed, but there is so much evidence scattered throughout the games that many fans consider it practically canon. Ditto would be what was left of the frustrated attempts to achieve perfection, the failure that preceded the monster. This is one of the most famous and bizarre theories in the Pokémon universe, and also one of the darkest. The idea that Ash has been in a coma since the first episode of the anime. It all starts right at the beginning of the series. In the first episode, Ash is running away from a flock of Spearow and, at the climax of the scene, Pikachu jumps to protect him and releases a lightning bolt so strong that the sky splits and everything turns white. The theory says that this shock was so violent that Ash did not survive or, at the very least, fell into a deep coma. From then on, everything that happens in the anime would be the world he created inside his own mind. And then everything starts to make sense, or rather to lose its meaning, like in a dream. Ash never ages. He has been 10 years old since 1997, regardless of the number of regions he visits or the time that passes. He encounters legendary creatures right away. In the first episode, he sees a Ho-Oh, a Pokémon that had not even been officially revealed at the time. This would be a sign that he is seeing beyond reality. Everything is idealized. People are generally good, villains are silly and repetitive, like Team Rocket, and even the most dangerous challenges rarely have real consequences. Like a dream where everything starts over again. Another detail. Each new region that Ash visits could represent a new psychological phase, a level of the coma, with characters that symbolize parts of himself. Brock and Misty would be his emotional needs, an older brother figure, support, romantic interest, etc. There are also those who say that the legendary Pokémon would be manifestations of his subconscious, representing power, fear, desire, or even memories of real life, like Latias in Pokémon Heroes, who ends up transforming into a girl who looks like someone Ash knows. And perhaps the saddest of all, the defeats he suffers, or the Pokémon that disappear, would be attempts by his brain to wake up, to deal with the pain of reality, but which fail because he is not ready to leave this safe and controlled world. Ultimately, the theory goes that Ash's journey is an escape from death, reality, and growing up, and that he would only wake up if he finally accepted that his real life could no longer be ignored. It's heavy, melancholic, and completely unofficial, but it fits eerily well with the unexplained details of the series. Do you believe this rumor? Leave your opinion in the comments below. This theory is simple, but absolutely fascinating. And the more you look at it, the more it seems to make sense. Gengar would be Clefable's living shadow. At first glance, it may seem like a coincidence, but the two have nearly identical body shapes. Just look. They both have pointy ears, short arms, wide feet, and small tails. They are practically the same size and weight. Gengar has a rounded body and large eyes, just like Clefable. But Gengar is dark, sinister, and has a mischievous smile. Clefable, on the other hand, is light, angelic, and docile. One looks like a fairy, the other, a smiling demon. The theory proposes that Gengar is literally Clefable's shadow, as if it were its negative manifestation, a living antithesis, like Peter Pan and his shadow. Only in this case, the shadow has taken on a life of its own. This idea is further strengthened by the type of each one. Clefable is fairy type, a type generally associated with purity, light, and protection. Gengar is ghost poison type, two of the darkest and most treacherous types in the franchise. In Japanese mythology, which inspires many Pokémon, it is common to believe that every creature has a spiritual shadow, and that if this shadow is separated, it can become something evil. Gengar fits this perfectly. A being made of shadow, which hides in the darkness, suddenly appears and feeds on fear. In addition, Gengar has one of the most disturbing Pokédex entries. In Pokémon Sun, for example, if you feel a shadow following you, it is a Gengar. It wants you to feel fear until your soul escapes. It is a being that lives in the shadows of others. Literally. Now put it all together. Appearance, type, behavior, symbolism. Gengar may be Clefable's dark side, a version that was born the same way, but was corrupted, forgotten, or rejected, and eventually gained a will of its own. And perhaps that's why Gengar laughs so much. He knows what he is. He knows where he came from. And now he watches everything from the shadows, like a distorted reflection of what could once have been light. This theory completely changes the way you see the Pokémon world. It says that the Pokémon universe, especially in the first generations, exists after a devastating war, and the signs are all there, just scattered in subtle ways. The main evidence comes from the speech of Let It Surge, the electric gym leader of Vermilion. When you face him in the Red and Blue games, he said, "Electric Pokémon saved me during the war." This simple sentence raises a huge question. What war? The game never mentions a war again. No town, gym leader, or NPC mentions it. It's as if it were a silent, hidden past. Now combine this with another detail that jumps out at you: the absence of adult men in Kanto. Most of the adult figures you encounter are women, elderly, or teenagers. The few adult men like Surge, Professor Oak, or some villains are exceptions. Where are the trainers' fathers? The older brothers? The teachers? The town chiefs? The theory goes that all these men were killed or sent to fight in a war that devastated part of society. And that is why the world is reconfigured. 10-year-old children are sent on journeys as a form of training and early maturity, something that resembles enlistment. Pokémon are treated as combat allies, with strategies, battles, and gyms that function almost like tactical training camps. Technology has advanced too quickly. Teleportation, instant healing, digital storage of living beings, as if everything had been created in the context of military urgency. Some fans go deeper. They suggest that the villainous teams like Rocket emerged from the power vacuum left by the war, acting as post-conflict factions, and that the Pokémon League would be a structure created to replace real combat with controlled battles, channeling society's aggression in a safe way, almost like a national rehabilitation program. None of this is officially confirmed, but when you put together Surge's speech, the absence of humans, the behavior of the cities, and the role of Pokémon, the theory makes a frightening amount of sense. The Pokémon world that seems happy and full of adventure may actually be a place of reconstruction, where the scars of war have been swept under the rug and turned into. This theory is simple, but disturbing. Pokeballs don't just store Pokémon. They trap their souls. In the games and anime, when a Pokémon is captured, It is transformed into light or energy. It physically disappears, becomes a beam of glowing data, and is then placed inside a small metal device. The theory goes that this process is not just physical, but spiritual, as if the Pokeball were a prison for the soul. Sounds like an exaggeration? Let's take a closer look. When you capture a Pokemon, it has no control over what happens inside. It doesn't come out whenever it wants, it doesn't speak, and often doesn't even resist. The Pokeball controls everything. Location, presence, exposure time, battles. It interrupts the Pokemon's natural existence and transforms it into a usable object. Some fans compare this to the concept of consciousness transmission or soul imprisonment, much like science fiction or even elements of magic. After all, Pokemon are not just matter, they have emotions, bonds, memories. So what goes into the Pokeball is not just a body, it is a living entity with its own identity, reduced to a compacted form of energy and obedience. In Pokemon Sword and Shield, there is a special Pokeball called a Dream Ball, used to capture Pokemon while they sleep, which further refers to this idea of mental invasion or imprisonment of the essence of the being. And in Legends Arceus, the concept goes even deeper. The first Pokeballs are made of wood, with steam coming out when capturing the Pokemon, as if a vital essence had been extracted. The feeling is that the Pokemon has been sealed, almost like in Japanese spiritual practices, which makes sense, since many aspects of the Pokemon universe are inspired by Japanese mythology and folklore. In addition, no Pokemon describes what it is like to be inside the Pokeball. The anime avoids this theme. At most, we have vague suggestions, like if it is comfortable or dark, but always without clarity. This raises suspicions. What if the reason they never show the inside of the Pokeball is because it's too disturbing? Ultimately, the theory is that Pokeballs are not neutral tools. They are devices that contain not just the physical form of the Pokemon, but their very essence, their soul, their consciousness, everything. You're not just capturing a being, you're keeping it suspended, perhaps forever, in a state where it only exists when you want it to exist.